Welcome to the State of Affairs in partnership with Serbian Radio Chicago. We are having conversations that matter, and I have a distinct privilege to have a very interesting guest today, Wylie McGraw, and the zinger title for him would be Performance Accelerator. However, he has such a rich background from being a competitive and professional baseball player to competitive bull rider to skydiving. But the most interesting and important title that we're going to stick to today is he is our veteran and he was a combat infantry leader. Wylie, welcome.
Dr. Ogle, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So just bring us a little bit up to speed in terms of this introduction that we just did. Obviously, starting in the 1980s, you were an athlete, but I am, as I said, interested in your military career, and then we'll go from there.
Right. Well, all the sports that I grew up in were the introduction to the world of focus, discipline, accountability, organization, and then it just led into these life experiences where I found the calling towards the military. And I have a very rich military family. Every man in my family served in every major conflict since World War II. So it was a time-honored tradition for us as patriots in the United States to, give part of our life to the country that we were raised and grew up in. So I felt like it was a natural next step for my progression when I left high school after being an athlete for so long. And I joined the United States Army and served with the 101st Airborne Division as a light infantry mortarman, specialized in mortar guns. I did 3 tours overseas. I learned a lot about myself in leadership and in war, especially what it takes to actually become in chaos. And I feel that really birthed a whole new understanding about the complexities and the dynamic nature of human performance in life, in business, in geopolitical landscapes, policy, politicians, et cetera. So it very much became a birthplace, if you will, for really understanding how people are in fact sacrificing and suffering in their lives and how that impacts and influences our ability to lead others.
Well, so thank you for your service and of course to your entire family. Where were you throughout your military career? Where did you do your tours overseas
My first tour,
in particular?
Yeah, my first tour was in Kosovo. So it was in the Balkans in 2000. And then of course I came home after spending nearly 8 months over there participating in Operation Joint Guardian, the humanitarian aid, peacekeeping missions that were sent on as well. And when I got home, I re-enlisted to stay in the Army for another 3 years. And of course, September 11th happened and we were immediately deployed to Afghanistan for combat operations and Operation Enduring Freedom. Coming home from that deployment, we turned around 6 months later and we were in Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom.
So looking at these different aspects of your military career and these different locations, is there now framing this in the geopolitical context and particularly in the context of U.S. foreign policy, what are the common threads that you see? Why you guys were deployed in these locations, and were some of these, I would say now in retrospect, foreign policy blunders on behalf of our powers that be?
The common thread, first and foremost, is I would say that a debacle in leadership. I think we have too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Pardon the best analogy that I can use, almost more chefs in the kitchen than we need. I think there's a conflict of personality. I think there is differences of opinions, and people are not trying to come to a middle ground common solution for the betterment of why they're in those positions to begin with. I think it starts to showcase to us, at least what I've seen, is there's more ego in charge than there is people coming to the table with balanced solutions of understanding what will find the commonality for all of us for the progression of our country, for the geopolitical impacts that we have on the country or on the world as the leader of the free world. And I think that's the common thread here, is really comes down to the type of leaders that we have in those positions of power and influence. And the reality is they're making decisions based on their own personal, I would say, ideals, rather than on the ideals that we were founded upon. I think we've lost track in leadership with the Constitution, what it means to be, the leaders of the free world, what it means to actually herald standards for what we would wish other nations to basically mimic or copy. And we're now almost shoving it down people's throats. We're almost forcing people to obey or adhere to what we think is going to be best for them. And I think that's why we end up falling very short of our goals when we go overseas. And Kosovo, I went over there, I saw it firsthand. We were there for a reason. We were there to help kind of play referee, if you will, to help with the different types of political divides between the Albanians, the Macedonians, the Serbians, etc., and all the conflict that was happening over there. But then you get into the middle of a conflict like combat during Afghanistan, you start to question, why are we actually over here? Now, I understand we got attacked, okay? We need to retaliate. We need to show that we're not weak. But there's other facets that start to, it's almost like smells that start to come up. And you go, that doesn't smell right. This doesn't look right. The way we're operating doesn't make sense for what we were told we were coming over here for. And then, of course, that parlays into the next deployment and then so on and so forth. And I think we all started to have these conversations together going, you know what, it doesn't feel right. Something else is going on that's amiss here, but we have no place to speak up in those moments. We just have to follow our orders and we have to operate the way we were meant to. And then we can come home and we can participate in political debate and getting involved in office if we want to, or coming out on social media, creating podcasts and start having these kinds of conversations to expose people that are typically lay to these situations to what might be really transpiring from the position of military leadership, freedom, war, and so forth.
Well, and so I would like to also go back to what you just said. Let's take Kosovo, for example.
Sure.
Are we truly, when we go to these locations, and based on what you told me, are we truly fair and neutral referees? Or those ideologues who lead you guys and send you on these missions, who are not going themselves or sending their own children to die, they send you. Are we fair mediators, or we are sent, or you are sent to actually pick sides and to actually promulgate now in retrospect a very specific agenda that doesn't look fair? Or ultimately, even what was happening with Kosovo, it wasn't constitutional because we went into that bombing. Clinton took it without the Security Council or congressional approval.
That's a great question. I would answer that with, I don't feel we are a very fair, middle of the road referee anywhere we go. There's always ulterior motives. I mean, there's a reason why we've become the most powerful nation on earth. There's a reason why we have such massive influence. Now, I can't speculate because I have never worked for, the alphabet agencies in my life, but I've known people that have, and I've heard stories that are, they're able to tell. We've had our little powwows, we've had conversations, but being overseas in that region, there are certain things we would do. And we're not, sitting around going blindly, let's just do whatever we're told. We're going to always have conversations with our leaders and say, what is the purpose of this mission, this operation right now? Is there a reason why we're chasing around this one individual throughout this entire region so that we can shut him up? Or is there actual threats to the lives of innocent people, to our safety, et cetera, that we need to make sure that we eliminate? So we start to question motives behind what we're actually doing when we're embedded into these situations. Doesn't mean we don't have good outcomes for why we're there. It doesn't mean the people that we took care of over there weren't grateful for what we were doing. That doesn't mean we didn't stop future attacks and future problems, but there's always that thought in your mind as a soldier, hey, wait a minute, why are we doing these things over here? Let's have these conversations. And you start to notice how people interact and behave when it comes to being in these situations or in these deployments. You're going, okay, it seems to be like you're leaning heavily more towards an outcome you've already preconceived that needs to happen so that we can complete whatever checkbox that they gave you prior to the deployment. Now, you fooled us and said, hey, we're going over there for this reason. Once we get in there, we're at the point where we don't have any say. And then we just have to follow orders because, well, who are we going to push back on the bigger, the leadership at the Pentagon level or the White House?
Absolutely. Understood. But so then looking at the Pentagon and looking at what I would call the policy blunders that we've had for decades now, and the fiasco, for example, leaving Afghanistan under Biden, which was such an embarrassment, and I would say it was a deliberate embarrassment. I'm more inclined to believe that we are being humored on the world stage deliberately, that we are not that superpower anymore. What is the difference that you see in military today? You're not active, obviously, but from the times you've been in the military to what is going on in the military today, what differences do you see?
It's the appeasement to the minority. It seems to be becoming the norm. It's almost the woke culture that's happening is starting to erode I would say, the sanctity of serving in the armed forces. And I have friends of mine, colleagues of mine that are still active duty. Some of them are 05, 06 commissioned officers. Some of them are master chiefs in the Navy. Some of them are command sergeant majors in the Army. These are guys that I served with when we were both, privates together, friends of mine from high school. And they're telling me how they no longer are able to advance because if you don't use pronouns, if you're not adhering to the type of culture that they use equity as the excuse or inclusivity as the excuse or diversity as the excuse, it doesn't matter what their beliefs are anymore. It doesn't matter what they feel is right or wrong or what their standards are. They are being forced to adhere to that minority's desire to feel good or feel comfortable in the military, where the military, when I was in, your feelings didn't matter. There was a very specific purpose of why we all joined. People would get in your face, you're getting yelled at, you're getting pushed, you're getting challenged because it's the military. When we have to go fight in conflicts, you can't afford to have people needing to worry about their pronouns, their safe space, the way their feelings are being respected.
What bathroom to use.
What bathroom to use, etc. I talked to a gentleman the other day who said he was a former colonel in the Air Force, and he told me, Wylie, he goes, my friend said he called someone stupid and they punished him for it in the military. It's becoming so weak where stupid was the average word. If you were lucky, you got that when I was in the combat arms in the military. So the difference now is that we are now appeasing to the weaknesses of individuals. There's something sinister behind that, because why would we even allow that to permeate into the armed forces when we're supposed to keep a ready, deployable war fighting machine at any notice that we can go anywhere in the world? It seems to be weakening from the inside, and there seems to be some purpose behind that. To me, that scares me, because as a global war and terrorism veteran and a lot of other guys like me, we're in our mid-40s, we're kind of looking back at the conflicts we served in, we're going, well, if they don't have the right people, if we have to go into a major conflict again, guess what they're going to do? They're going to turn towards those of us that are still able-bodied. And now we're being pulled back in. There's a potential, I won't even call it a military draft. It's almost like what they call that a constriction, or there's a forcefulness where they bring you back in. So we have no idea what's up in the air right now. If you don't have the Army making its quota, which last fiscal year, 25%, they missed their recruitment quota. What's going to happen if we go to war with Russia, China, North Korea, heaven forbid? So
anyone.
That's the difference that I see. Anyone in general, yeah.
Well, and so my question is on the recruitment, for example. I think widely circulated videos out of Russia, for example, out of China, of their recruitment tactics and the way their military looks like. And some of these countries still have military parades, which is very typical for those nations. And then you look at a recruitment video on our end here, and they start with, I was raised in a two-mom family, and I'm bipolar, cisgender, whatever. I can't even list it anymore.
I get it.
What does that tell us about the strength of our military forces today, or the weakness of it?
It tells us about the weakness of it. To me, when I joined, the Be All You Could Be commercials were out back in the 90s, and it was motivational. Jump out of airplanes, go to become a ranger, go fight for your country. Every commercial we had was very high speed. It was very much, this is what it means to serve your nation, but it's going to be the biggest challenge you've ever experienced in your entire life. So that's motivational right there. That, you know what, I want to go give to something bigger than myself. That has been stripped away. That is completely gone. I saw a video the other day. I'm glad you brought that up. The other day that I think was being circulated on Twitter, asking these young kids that are these S1 and like supply
I saw that.
Kids.
Yes.
Saw that. Why did you join the Army? And it's for having a child, or it's for, having food, or it's for if you have free college. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with having motives for joining the military. You know what? You want to go to school. I totally understand that. But they're circulating these videos on purpose. There's a reason why. It's to subconsciously get us to believe that we are no longer the greatest nation on earth. It's to weaken our resolve. It's to make us feel inadequate, and it starts to permeate the population, and it starts to break us from within. And it tells our adversaries, You can come here now. You can poke at us now. You can start to do things you otherwise would never do before. And now we're fighting amongst ourselves to try to figure out how we save our military. And our leaders are being silenced or being pushed out, the ones that actually want to hold it together, because we need someone in a dog mask to take a picture in front of an American flag to say, this is what inclusivity is all about in America. It's like, I'm sorry, the American flag is what inclusivity is all about. That's all we need. So I think we're losing our way, and it comes back to the leadership aspect of it, where our politicians are trying to appease to people's emotions rather than to a semblance of what we stand for on a world stage and who we really are with our ideals in the Constitution.
But it seems we are appeasing to the lowest common denominator of degeneracy that we are essentially exporting into the world. And the world essentially is not really buying what we're selling anymore as the country that was that proud, pillar of light on the hill. We're not that anymore. Nobody looks at us that way because we're selling them something that they really don't want.
We're trying to force it down their throats too, as this is what it looks like. And it's, no, people on the outside and those that have not, or maybe listening, have not really traveled, probably don't have the perspective though. But if you are well traveled, you'll understand that you're right. I've been to all over the Balkans. I've been to Europe. I've been all over Southwest Asia or Southeast Asia. It's amazing when you listen to the culture and how people talk about how they view us. They're like, we used to respect and look up to you, but now we're almost concerned. Some of them have told me we're concerned, Wylie, about what's going on over there. We always see on TikTok videos and YouTube is everyone's got a pronoun now. Everybody's trans. Everyone has emotional problems. Everybody's a bigot if you don't agree with the way they believe, even though you're supposed to be the country that represents freedom. You're supposed to be the one that represents honoring each other. And here you are fighting amongst each other. And it makes us nervous for the world because you are the ones that we did look up to. And it scares us here too, that actually see it like you and go, wait a minute, what are we doing? And it goes back to the fact that why are we trying so hard to make everybody seem equal rather than leaving it into the place of making people work hard to become something that can be honored, respected? I think social media has allowed people to be anything but civilized. It has allowed people to express their dysfunctions. It has allowed people to share their traumas. It has allowed people to just be whoever they want to be. And if you don't accept it, right, you're racist, you're bigot, you're a problem. And then our leaders hear that and they go, well, let's make our policies so we can get their votes, so we can get them to. Based on that. Yeah, based on that.
Sure. Well, it's obvious to the world that we have lost our way. It's obvious to us here that we're going through the motions daily. But then going back, there is a common joke, and I know you've traveled around the world, so I'm sure you know this. If you don't do what the Americans want, they will also export democracy to you. And that statement of us bringing democracy, which is one size fits all type of thing, as Hillary Clinton would tell us, that has gotten us in a lot of trouble around the world. And I kind of want to go back to these places that you've been.
Sure.
Should we have been there in the first place? Was that really our place to even be involved? What are we defending so far across the world? Shouldn't we defend our nation here? What is it that we're defending all around the world, really? And let's now pinpoint the current conflict. What are we doing in Ukraine? Although we're not there on the ground, but de facto, de jure, we are.
Yes. What are we doing? The air quotes for those who can't see us talking. It's like that. What are we doing? We're not over there, but are we? And the fact that we keep shelling out the kind of money we do for this almost proxy, it seems on the surface like a proxy war. Because I understand that people are going to get into the whole, you're a conspiracy theorist. There's nothing really going on. We're supposed to be supporting freedoms. I have friends of mine that are all supportive of Ukraine. I can completely understand why their mindset is that. But at the same time, it's like our borders. We have so much dysfunction within our own. It's our own home is not together.
Exactly. Are we defending our home?
No. We're not. You know why? We can see the byproducts of the lack of leadership when it comes to defending our own home is people now fending for themselves. People saying, pull your kids out of public schools, start your own school systems. There's a popular public figure, a special operations guy, Tim Kennedy, talks about that as well. He's like, you need to homeschool your kids or start your own darn school. We're starting to see the fractures within. That's a byproduct of us not actually defending our own nation. But we have plenty to give the rest of the world, because it's almost like we're trying to keep up an image, keeping up with the whole Kardashians, right? The Joneses, if you will. We're trying to look a certain way, but people are reading right through that now. Yes. Our own house is not in order. And being overseas, from my time in the service, there was questions. Afghanistan was a question. Iraq was definitely a question. We destabilized that region. I don't care what anybody says, we did. We destabilized it. There were people that liked us there, but there were also people that wanted us out. And I talked to some Iraqis when I was there, when we did a specific type of a mission to support certain political aspects over there. And they would tell us, some of my friends think you're the Imperial Army trying to force us to do what you want us to do, rather than give us the options to help us better our lives. It doesn't feel like you want to better our lives. It feels like you want us to live how you live. And that really irritates a lot of different cultures. And it's like, yes, who are we to come in here and tell them how to live, rather than giving them options? Hey, we can support you if you would like to adopt certain things. We would just like to make sure that you can live in a space where you feel secure in your own borders. We're not doing that anymore. We're almost telling them, you have to do it this way. And it's unacceptable. September 11th, I understand we were, quote, attacked, but if you go over there, we were going, hey, check out, you see all these poppy fields over here? You see this over here? Why are we actually over here? What's going on in this area of the region? Why are we focused on this as well as this, instead of just focusing on this? And I remember someone told me, I don't know if it was even Jeremy or someone else that told me, that we haven't really fought a war for real freedom for America since World War II. And I remember Vietnam, they took God out of schools, and then Kennedy was assassinated. Then we went to Vietnam, and it became this mess of political ambition and people wanting to be seen as wartime leaders. So they're willing to do whatever it takes and use the military as their own machine to those ends.
Well, and so then let's look at Ukraine. Billions of dollars are being sent with weaponry and everything else that you could possibly imagine. Right. And I think we all understand that it's a big money laundromat that's happening here, because a lot of that money does end up coming back here into very specific pockets, and that our military industrial complex is making a killing right now, because war is a racket, and we always knew that. But what is the bottom line? How far is enough for the American people to wake up and somehow, and we can discuss how, to stop this? Because obviously our leaders that be are so completely removed from their own voters and their own electorate that they don't represent them anymore. American people don't want to have anything to do with this, but yet here we are.
Here we are. I think it's what popped up for me when you were asking that question was that it's almost like that adage or story about the frog in the boiling pot of water. And you put the frog in the pot of water and you slowly heat it up. It won't even know it's being boiled alive until it's too late. I feel like that's where we're at. I feel that we're boiling slowly and steadily, and the leaders, again, air quotes, are little by little testing the waters with what they can get away with. And the government has become a little bit too big for its own britches. And that's the other aspect of it as well. We've given too much power to the government that's supposed to be serving as our own referee in our nation, not our masters. And that's the part where we're going to be driven off a cliff unless we, like you said, how do we stop this car before we go off the cliff with this government and the racket that they are perpetuating upon us? And I think it comes down to the fact that we need to infiltrate politicians with other leaders that actually talk like this, understand what we're talking about, and are willing to do whatever it takes to shake up the status quo and actually stop in its tracks those people that actually have the money, that are in power behind the politicians, that are driving the car. Because what we see in the media and what we see through our elected officials is not what's really going on. There are people with a lot of money and a lot of power that are driving this car, and we have to kick them out of the driver's seat. But we don't have enough right now to really, I would say, rally the troops. And it eventually is going to get to the point. Something bad's going to happen. I don't know what that is, but it's going to happen. Something's going to pop. That frog's going to jump out of the pot, and it's going to be a really, really gnarly day for the rest of America. And that's the only way we're going to hit a reset button is if we're willing to fight for it.
Interesting. And we often talk about the types of fighting that
Hmm.
will take to reclaim our nation back. And
Right.
I think one of the greatest legacies, for example, of President Trump, and people argue what his greatest legacy is, whether we elect him in 24 or not. However, I think he was that one person that shook not only the Americans, but shook the world and exposed the depth of the corruption, particularly even on that foreign policy front. Because up
Right.
until that point, people really didn't understand why you guys were sent to all these places. And if you talked about it and you know, if you said anything against sending you guys to Iraq or anywhere else, you were deemed isolationist. Although I don't believe that we can ever be isolationist, but we can be non-interventionist, because it seems we were so trigger happy to just keep going into war. I mean,
Right.
you know, our politicians, some of them have not seen a war that they were not happy about. Um, Trump was able to expose this. I think that's actually his greatest legacy.
Right.
He woke up a lot of people. But so now
Yeah.
looking into 24 and having you guys out there potentially being called back into some sort of a conflict, and we're very casually talking about even nuclear conflict, which is insane to me.
Mm.
What do you foresee going forward? Because we have an existential election, obviously, if we
We
even
do. I
have it.
think if we have it, I think 2024 is definitely going to be a turning point for us. It's going to be that litmus test for where we're really going to go forward as a country. Going back to what you shared, Trump's personality, people have tried to make it more complicated than it really is, was necessary. And I talked about this the other day. It was so necessary to actually cause a massive eruption with everything going on. It's amazing how no matter what he did, no matter if you like him, don't like him, whatever, the fact is every conversation that was constantly being silenced, he was able to expose, he was able to erupt, from the government agencies doing what they're doing in secrecy, all the way to how politicians are taking money, how our military is being used, how politics operates in general. It almost exposed the cracks where now we have so much public discourse happening on Twitter and other social media platforms. It's really allowing us to churn the energy of what might need to be the solutions so we can fix the problems. And the more we can get patriots into those conversations and we can start to push away the left, the tyranny of the left who's trying to silence conservatives, the conservatives maybe over here on the extreme side that might be trying to do it their own way. We get people to a place that can actually push more solutions to the table. I think we can unseat people in positions of power. I think we need more resources that know how to actually fight these leaders behind the scenes a little bit more intimately and auto-correct their decision making, get them to become aware, because I think they're operating almost in a trance, a state of trance where they're kind of not aware of what they're really doing. They're just being pushed and driven by their own propaganda, and they're starting to believe those lies.
And they believe
the other thing
it.
is they believe it. The other thing is true is we have to figure out how to make sure podcasting and different platforms become the new media, because our legacy media is, in fact, unfortunately, very heavily biased, and it's spinning everything, and it's
Absolutely.
pissing Americans off, just like us when we went to war. You know why America was so trigger happy? It's because they riled us up, that we're constantly attacked by these people living in caves, and everybody hates us because we stand for everything that's good in the world. And it's like, well, maybe there's more to it than that, but you can't knock the service members who are patriots, who want to defend what they love behind them. We're going to go do what we're meant to do. If we have to fight, we're going to fight. But we also will question part of the reason why we're over there. There are good things we did, absolutely. But there are other things we're like, this is some utter BS. And clearly there's a reason why Halliburton and all those other big companies are over here seeing fit what they've got building for us, because they're making money off this. It's a machine. It totally makes sense. So I think going back to that is 2024 being in that litmus test is going to require, I think, a lot of veterans, if they're listening, a lot of people that support patriotism and really do want to see this. We have to stop being, what's the word I'm looking for? We have to stop being reporters. We have to start becoming reformers. We have to be willing to step up and go outside of our comfort zones of what we feel is appropriate for being an activist, being someone who gets involved in politics, who comes on shows like yours, and be willing to risk a little bit of our own safety to see it change. I think there's too many people that talk it and they want it, but they're a little afraid of where to start. And if we can rally enough people to pull them out of their shadows here, we can get them out in the forefront. We can actually create a new front of a fight. We don't necessarily have to get into gunfights in America, even though that can always be an option and made down the road. But let's start with fighting together in a way where we actually make so much noise that they have no other choice but to listen. And if they don't listen, then we can take it up a notch. We can create a different kind of approach. But we got to start there. We got to get people to stop being afraid of their own safety and their own worries about how their life's going to turn out, and just, you know what, step up, fight something, even if it's going out and joining an organization that, you know, does grassroots stuff for a politician that actually is maybe potentially wanting to do something good for you. Start there, go do that.
And that was something I was going to ask you, because I think we all understand that people really are truly afraid. And
Right.
you can't blame them, because when you see how the government became so weaponized against our own duly elected president, well, what can happen to, you know, an average American? They'll send you somewhere into the gulag and we'll never hear from you again. So it's understandable that people will lose their careers, their jobs, their families by coming to the forefront. But you're right, it's going to take few brave souls like ourselves to motivate and mobilize and continue to use the democratic process and the democratic elements that we have at our disposal to fight this. But then my next question is, well, what if not? Because as you mentioned already, there are people behind the scenes, obviously behind our elected officials, who are unelected and who are very able to drive the path that we are on. And how do we get rid of them? How do you get rid of an unelected bureaucrat, poster child, for example, Dr. Fauci, cannot fire them?
Right.
So you can see the kind of impact they have versus our elected officials that, yes, possibly we can change that on the ballot box. What about the unelected ones?
Well, this is a three-dimensional chess. That is absolutely without a doubt what's going on, and it's very difficult. It's not as easy as straightforward operational planning. Hey, we have these people. Let's get in here and let's push them out. There needs to be some strategy behind how to play that chess with them. I think that also starts with the fact that we need more voices. I think there's a gentleman who's a former special forces guy. His name's Mike Glover. He started this American Contingency Network, and the FBI labeled him a domestic terrorist. He was on Joe Rogan's show, talked about it. And it's amazing how when you start getting military warriors coming out and organizing American patriots for this very purpose that you and I are talking about, how the government will then immediately spin whatever laws, whatever rules they have to try to label that person a conspiracy theorist, a threat, a terrorist, etc., to shut them down because they can see the power that's starting to be churned through their organization. All he was doing was creating disaster preparedness communities, because average Americans want to know what happens when my government doesn't show up for me. I have a community of people that I can participate. How is that a domestic terrorist? It's not. But look what they're doing to military service members who are even Green Berets, Navy SEALs, etc. Combat arms guys that go overseas and fight for this very country are getting turned on by their own government when they're trying to rally Americans. I think what we need to do is push through that fear and really make sure that we become noisy with those types of organizations and really build up a consortium of people, regardless of their political background, regardless of their public persona, how much notoriety or money they have. Get people you can feel that are really motivated and driven to organize and push through that noise, because in numbers, there's more power. We are bigger than our government. I think we are so brainwashed into believing our government's bigger than we really are, that the powers that have the money are bigger than we really are. Money at the end of the day is powerful, but it doesn't always have to be. There's a way in which we can make them realize my money is going to do nothing for me, because I cannot fight against millions of people who have stood up and have pushed really hard, like those Spartans at Tripoli, the 300 of the fought, fought the Persians. It's like, why were they able to do that? They didn't care how many the enemy were. They just said, where are they? And that's the thing Americans need to hear, or even those that support America with what we're going on, need to really be willing to push through that threshold of fear and not let fear actually stop us as we watch things be eroded from the inside out based on a few. And it is the power of the minority starting to become the tyranny. And that's what's scary. But if we don't do anything, if we're not willing to sacrifice our own safety, our own comforts for it, we're going to lose it.
We certainly are losing the country, and it has to be America first, because obviously our government is making it about Ukraine first and whatever other country first and America last. We certainly have a duty.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what's interesting is what they're doing it too is spinning it as Putin's a threat to the West and the freedom of the West. Is he though? Because at the end of the day, he's very smart. Nobody's saying he's not. But if you break it down, is it truly the threat? Do you think that, again, I understand he wants to build Russia back up to the power it once was. We get that. What leader doesn't want their country to be something
Absolutely.
special?
Every nation has a right to their own national interest.
But is it truly a threat to the degree that we're speaking to our own citizens that it is? Is he really going to take Ukraine and then come after us and throw? It's almost like it doesn't make sense. That's why you hear a lot of Americans supporting they go Russia. I'd rather see him figure this out, because what are we doing? And if we're not going to get involved in this, why are we acting like we're involved in it? Why is it that Hawaii burns and you can barely get the president to go see? That's not a good look, Joe. I'm sorry.
Absolutely not.
That to me, that makes people question what's really going on. Why are we seeing this fire the way we are and burning all over the country? And why are you turning around, sending that kind of money over there when we have Americans that are suffering over here? To me, it's unacceptable. We need a reset, and it is America first reset. It doesn't mean we stop taking care of our responsibilities around the world. It just means pull back, regroup, and reorient yourself on a new operational order so that you can fix what we have at home, and then you can still go out into the world and actually support the rest of the policies that we have put in place in the geopolitical landscape. I think we're too spread thin and we're too weak, but yet we're still trying to act like we're tough, and we're trying to show up this front that we've got it all together, and people are looking right through that going, man, I don't know what's going to happen if you don't fix your house. I'm scared for the world.
So am I, and as it was said, the house divided against itself cannot stand. And that's literally where we are. Thank you so much for being with us today. Fascinating conversation. And we'll keep in touch and do something that is saving America.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.